I'm writing this as a last-ditch attempt, and I'm a bit rushed for time, so sorry if this is a bit jumbled, as it's almost midnight. Right, I need to give you some context. I've lived in New Zealand all my life, never staying in one town or city very long. But one thing I always told myself was I would never return to my hometown of Lathven, a small town situated right under a well-renowned ski field. I'm getting off track. One thing I was always curious about was the disappearances. Every night, at exactly midnight, a shriek? Scream? I don't know how to explain it. Something between a dying cougar and a wolf's howl. Regardless of what it sounds like, it really scared the shit out of me as a child, but eventually, we got used to it. One thing I never got used to, however, was the fact that every night, a few minutes after the ominous howl, a shriek could be heard, a very, very human shriek, but never the same. Sometimes it sounded young, sometimes old, and a person fitting the shriek was always gone by the time dawn rose. I never truly questioned it though, thinking maybe it was some animal that sounded human and could mimic. That alone was scary enough for a 5-year-old. But what truly made it sink in was what was happening when I was in year 6, 5th grade for you Americans. My best friend Tim disappeared after a very loud childlike scream had been heard the night before. You see, he lived next door to me. That's how we met, after our fathers went to a barbecue and started talking. After that, we were inseparable. I think I finally realized that day that what my naive self had believed to be people moving away wasn't the case, and that my parents had told me that to calm my young mind. That dawning realization was the day I vowed I'd leave as soon as possible and never return. But first, I needed answers. Quickly, I found that no one was going to be volunteering any information, and certainly not my parents. I never did find out much from my snooping, but I think at some point or another I lost interest and just accepted it. I grieved my friend and moved on after that, but the dread within me never went away. It never settled no matter how many nights I was awoken by screams. I didn't wake every night, as sometimes the screams were further or closer away. I was 18 when it happened. I jolted awake and was instantly on my feet when I heard the terrible howl. It was right outside, likely in our backyard. Now was my chance. I dashed over to my window, adrenaline pumping, but when I got there, nothing. I went to lay back in bed, heart thumping still when I heard a creak. It was barely noticeable, but it was there. Normally I'd assume it was a normal house noise, as there was a slight breeze outside. But this was not a normal night. The howl, or whatever it was, had never sounded that close. I sat up, too scared to move. I felt like a 5-year-old child once again, all the fear bubbling back up. What happened next is something I will never forget. In moments, I was up out of bed, grabbing my baseball bat and storming into the hallway. My ears rang from the loud, pain and fear-stricken cry I had heard come from my parents' room. I ran in to see my mother huddled in the corner, curled in a ball and shaking. Tears dripped from her eyes, her hollow eyes. I don't know what she saw, but after that day, it was never the same. I went to the police the next day to file for a missing persons, but I knew nothing would come of it. My father, the one who taught me to shave, the one who bought me my first beer and my first suit, he was now a memory. A painful memory that I'd be reminded of every time I saw his face on the community board, big red words reading "missing" underneath. We all knew that he wouldn't be found though. The police didn't even look anymore because they never found anything. The last time I saw my mother was 2 days after my father was taken. She was being put in the hospital for a psych evaluation at my request. I will admit that I don't know how it went, because that day I had packed my bags and I was gone. I do still feel bad to this day, but do I regret it? No. After I'd left town, I had nothing but bad luck. No one would hire me, and I ended up homeless for a while. Then we flicked to almost a month ago when I broke my vow and came crawling straight back to this hell. Anyways, that is plenty of backstory. Now, you may be wondering, how do I know I am next? This thing is methodical, and it seems to be smart. It goes down street by street, house by house, but never in perfect order, probably to still have the element of surprise. But it never does the same house more than once every few months. It's almost like it farms us, and despite the number of witnesses, we still know almost nothing about this hellhound. Most of the witnesses are so traumatized in the moment that they bite off their tongue, or at very least are so deeply disturbed they refuse to talk about the topic and will shut down at the very mention of it. One new thing to note in this town is a new church of sorts. I haven't been, but it's more popular than Christianity in this town. It is settled in an old Victorian-style chapel just a few streets down from my parents' house. They call themselves the Silent Ones. They seem to worship the evil that stalks this town, but to join, you have to have had a family taken. The ones who see this thing are considered chosen and make up the majority of the priests, hence the name. I refuse to step foot in those doors. I've never been a religious person, and I sure as hell am not going to worship the creature that preys upon this cursed town. When I got back, I was told by an old family friend, one of the town's elders, that my mother had been taken by it a few months back. I couldn't even say I was surprised. It got everyone eventually, even the members of the Silent Ones, it seemed. The only people it didn't seem to take were pregnant. Couldn't have itself killed the source of its future food, could it? I've been here for just over 2 weeks now. I am living in my old home, and even the slightest noise wakes me in a complete panic. The last few nights, I haven't even slept. Running on monsters and coffee. Every night, I hear it loom closer and closer, slowly taking people from my street again. And I know I'm next, and if not, it'll happen soon. Every house has one taken every rotation. I have a few things to help me for when that creature comes knocking. I brought myself a hunting rifle. It's only meant for rabbits, but it's something. At this rate, though, I may just end up using it on myself. I'm so scared, guys. I can't let it take me too. Here's what I know about this creature. It's lean and no, not tonight. Please. I just heard its banshee scream from outside my window. It seems I've run out of time. Someone, please help me. I just know this gun is useless. I'm gonna post this now. I can hear something creeping through the house just out of sight. I've got my gun loaded, and now all I can do is pray. If I don't reply to this post by morning, know I didn't go missing. You know the truth. Wish me luck. This happened to me over a year ago, at the end of March 2017, and I still can't be alone in my own home. 3 years earlier, I had moved into a house that my grandparents left me before they passed away. I had spent some time renovating and was happy enough with it to move in. My grandparents had rented out the top floor to students and had made it into a small apartment. When I moved in, I decided to let my cousin, who had some small personal problems, move in upstairs, while my fiancé and I used the 2 remaining floors for ourselves. We live in a small town, and like in all small towns, everyone basically knows everyone. And like most men in our town, my fiancé is a fisherman and goes away for long periods of time during the winter, sometimes from January to May. In our town, there are 2 brothers that are, well, I guess you can call them weird. Some may say original, though we all know they had struggles in the past that probably is the reason behind their behavior. But my path never crossed their path, and I never talked to them, mostly because of age difference. This particular night, I was home alone. My fiancé was up north fishing, and my cousin was visiting family. I had come home late from work and was chilling with a glass of wine in front of the TV. I can't remember what was on. I usually just need to empty my head after work, so I was just sitting there in the dark with nothing but the lights from the TV, lost in my own thoughts after a long evening shift. That's when I thought I heard some sounds outside. Usually when I hear sounds like that, I brush it off. I live in an old house. Old houses make sounds randomly, and the rain was pouring down outside. Only once had it happened that there was actually someone out there, and that time it had been an East European group of guys scouting out our house, since some groups like that like to travel around to small places and do burglary and petty crimes. I had this in mind, but I had not been home at the point. Only my fiancé and cousin was, and they ran after them, and the men jumped in their car, and we never saw them again. I told myself the sound I had just heard was either the house or the rain, until I heard another sound again, more clearly this time, and this time it came from the deck on the side of the house that I sat. I froze as I heard steps moving closer to the window where I sat. The first window this person would come to, moving from that side of the house, would be my bedroom. He or she wouldn't see anything inside there. The curtains were down and the lights off. The steps kept moving towards the door we had on that side of the house, and I knew once they got there, they would be able to stare directly at me through the door window. I quickly turned off the TV so the room got dark. By doing this, I would for sure be telling them that I was at home, unless they came from the forest behind the house, which means they had to climb and crawl a lot. They would have seen that the TV was on from the front of the house. To give you an idea how my floor plan is, my house is built so that from the front you see the kitchen through 2 windows and the living room through 1. Moving around the house to the back, you have the window to the bathroom, bedroom, and door to the living room. And on one side you have a couple of big windows into the living room, and on the opposite side the entrance to the hall. And all around the ground floor we have a deck. So I sat still, my heart beating fast. I could barely breathe while I heard the steps, now slower, come closer to the door. The wood on the deck making sounds as the weight of the person pushed down on it. That's when I see a big shadow of a man outside the window, stopping and looking in. I stayed still in the chair I was sitting, hoping it was dark enough that he couldn't see me. As he started moving again, I gasped for air. I could hear him walking into my outdoor furniture and stopping. He probably didn't see them in the dark. For a split second, I debated with myself if I should go and turn on the deck lights, but I didn't want to let him know I had seen him, scared of what this person could do. I lived in a small town, in one of the most baby-proof countries in the world. These things were not supposed to happen here. Well, at least I had felt safe up until then. It could have been someone pranking me thinking they were hilarious, but I was not willing to take that chance. I grabbed my phone and ran as quickly as I could out to the kitchen and hid under the open counter area. I knew he wouldn't be able to spot me there from any window if I sat still. I quickly started dialing my dad's number, figuring it was either him or my brother who would come to help me fast enough. We share police with a neighboring town, and they are usually stationed there, which means it would take them at least 35 minutes to get to me. Though it was late, my dad was quick to pick up, figuring I wouldn't call him that late if it wasn't important. He told me that later. I whispered quickly in the phone, so fast and with such a low voice that my dad couldn't hear me, and I had to repeat myself. There's someone outside the house. He just looked through the window. As I said it the second time, I couldn't hold back my tears and I started sobbing. My dad told me to stay put and he would be on his way. He hung up, and I can remember how I wished he wouldn't have done that. I would have felt safer had he stayed on the line, but I would soon find out why he had hung up. I tried to call my fiancé, straight to voicemail. And again, straight to voicemail. I stared at my phone, hoping someone would call, trying to keep out the sound of the footsteps that I could hear coming closer to the kitchen. Then absolute silence. I held my breath listening, but I could only hear my own heartbeats. Had he jumped off the deck to the side where it was the closest to the ground? I waited before I crawled out and carefully peeked out to one of the kitchen windows. I spotted him walking slowly away from the house down my driveway. Then he stopped and turned around looking towards the window where I was sitting. Was he smiling? I couldn't tell because it was so dark and the street lights was not enough for me to see him clearly, but I could have swore he was smiling at me. At the same time, my driveway got lit up with lights from a car, and I could see who he was before he ran into the neighbor's driveway and disappeared behind some bushes. I jumped up when I realized whose car it was, my dad's business partner, John. I ran out towards him. My dad had called him and asked him to go to my house because he was closer. I had never been happier to see him. I quickly told him who I had seen, and he assured me that my dad was only minutes away before he jumped in his car to pursue the man. The man I had seen had been one of these brothers that we all find weird, the one known to be a schizophrenic drug addict. But why had he been outside my house? He was not known to burglarize people's home. My dad came and we called the police, who came and took my statement. John came back and said that he had not been able to spot him and that he had probably ran into the forest on the other side of my neighbor's house. The police couldn't arrest the guy since he hadn't done anything. Scaring the living shit out of someone was not a big enough crime, but they knew who he was and promised to talk to him and tell him to stop scaring people. As for me, they told me to call them if he ever did it again. I didn't stick around to see if he came back that night. I packed some things and stayed over at my parents' house until my cousin came home 2 days later. Sadly, this was just the beginning of something that would last for almost 4 months. A week or so had passed since this guy had lurked outside my house. I was busy working and didn't have much time for anything else, though I had the episode fresh in my mind every time I went to bed. That Friday after work, I was going to have some friends over for food and game night, so I stopped by a store to get some groceries. As I stepped out of my car, I could see someone from the corner of my eye, mostly because this person had bright red and pink clothes on. As I turned to walk in, I saw him. He was on a bench looking at me with a smirk on his face. The chills I got there and then is indescribable. I walked as fast as I could into the store and grabbed the things I needed before I hurried back to my car. I couldn't see him anywhere until I left the parking lot. He was standing with his bike behind a building, peeking around the corner. As I passed him, our eyes met for a split second before I stepped on the gas to get away from there. That same night, after my guests had left, I went to bed and was laying in my bed checking my Facebook, Snapchat, and Twitter, and Instagram. Yeah, the whole routine before going to sleep. I heard my cousin unlocking the front door before locking it, and I heard him walking upstairs to his apartment. At least I knew he was home and I could finally go to sleep. I must have been half asleep, half awake when I heard someone knocking on one of the windows in my living room. My heart was beating so fast in my chest and I froze. It quickly went from knocking to pounding. I was sure this person soon would break the window. Of course, the first thought that hit me was that the same guy was back. He had seen me at the store, now he was back to terrorize me some more. Then the knocking moved to my bedroom window. While knocking, he started shouting, "Open up! I know you're home!" I was so scared, I can't even describe how scared I was. He repeated the sentence while slamming his hands against the window. I'm not too religious, but at that moment I was praying to all kinds of gods. I slowly picked up my phone, about to call my cousin, when my cousin texted me, "Just pretend that you're not there and he'll go away," is what he wrote. That is when I understood that the guy that was out there was there for my cousin, which meant that my cousin would have met them at the local bar or wherever he had been. I wrote back a short F you to my cousin. The guy outside my window, however, just kept going. He knocked on all my windows and rang my doorbell for about 10 to 15 minutes before it got quiet. I went out to the kitchen in time to see him leave, and when he was under the streetlight, I could see that it had been the brother of the first guy. The day after, my cousin told me that he had met him at a party and they had argued and he had followed him home. I do believe my cousin was lying though. My cousin has an on and off relationship with drugs. This was within a period where he was on. My guess is that he had gotten some drugs from the guy that he didn't want to pay for the whole amount of it. What happened the day after makes me even more sure about this, because the same afternoon he was back. He rang the doorbell and I opened, and it was after I opened I knew who it was, or else I probably wouldn't have opened. He asked for my cousin. He said my cousin owed him something. I told him my cousin lived upstairs and that he had his own doorbell. I also knew my cousin had just left, so I told him this. Before he left, I got tougher than I have ever been before or since. I took a deep breath before I let him know that it was not nice to knock on people's windows during the night and that he had scared me. He actually said he was sorry and that he wouldn't do it again. Fast forward 2 weeks. I was out on my daily run with music in my ears and not really thinking about much or not really paying attention to anything but the road in front of me when I had to stop to tie my shoelaces. As I got up, I could see the guy from the first night standing at the top of a hill with his bike, and he was looking at me. I got back up and started running again, but this time I looked over my shoulder, and to my surprise, he was already getting closer to me. I took a route where I knew there would be more people, but that was a bit longer. After changing directions, I looked over my shoulder again, and he was even closer. I begged that I would see someone I knew so that I could stop and talk to them and let him pass. But when he was right behind me, I still had not seen anyone. However, I saw a man out walking his dog and stopped in front of them. I said I thought his dog was cute and he let me pet it. The guy passed us on his bike, but I could see that he kept looking at me over his shoulder, all while he had that crazy smirk on his face. The man with the dog asked if I was okay. I didn't want to sound paranoid, so I just said yes. I couldn't see the stalker on his bike anywhere, but I still decided to run back and take my originally planned route. I was almost at home when I spotted him at a bus stop, leaned over his bike, looking down on what was probably his phone. I crossed the street and looked over my shoulder to see if he saw me. I thought I had made it home unnoticed. Still, I locked the door behind me as soon as I was inside at home. But when I was in the kitchen getting something to drink, I could see him on his bike, slowly moving past my driveway, looking up at my house before disappearing behind some trees. I went and took a shower, and after, I was just going to relax and click around on the web. I started checking my Facebook. I could see that I had a new friend request and clicked on it. Guess who? Yup. I have no idea how he had found my name or my Facebook, but as I wrote in my first post, I live in a small town. It wouldn't have taken him much time to find out who I am. He might even have read it off my mailbox. I did not add him as a friend, though. A couple of days later, while I was at work, I get a message on my messenger. It said that someone had asked to send me a message. When I opened up, there is his name again. I clicked on decline. No way, dude. He tried to get in contact with me over Messenger for about a week, and I blocked him. After this, I one day came home to a note on my door. It said, "Add me on Facebook," and his first name and a made-up last name. I think it was Bond or something like that. I saved the note and later handed it over to the police when the stalking got a bit too much. His brother never came back to the house, but the one time the both of them was walking behind me when I was out walking with some friends, just looking at us. His brother also once asked me why I didn't want to add them on Facebook and why I didn't talk to his brother. I never replied to any one of them. I finally got my cousin to tell them to chill on the stalking. This is when it went from bad to worse, with daily visits from at least one of them, but mostly the first guy. I think the brother might have showed up to where I was like 3 times. The first visitor started hanging around outside my office, gym, house, anywhere I was really. It got really intense. Of course, I started telling more people about this, and all of them told me to contact the police, which I did. I gave them the note and messenger messages. I told them about the stalking and said I had witnesses. They promised me that they would keep an eye on him and told me that it was not his first time doing these things. That didn't calm me at all. Why couldn't they just get him to get some help? So this stalking that he did went on for another month, and it seemed like he just enjoyed the attention the police gave him because the days they told him to stop, he just came back an extra time. Finally, my fiancé came home from work, and the two of us was out at a restaurant eating one night. I had, of course, told him about the stalking. We were about to leave when we saw the guy standing outside the restaurant. My fiancé went straight out the door and over to him. I didn't hear everything that was said, but I heard my fiancé telling the guy he would put his foot up somewhere. After that, I only saw the guy stalking me like 3 times. My fiancé is a strong dude, but I don't know if it was that or that the guy just finally gave up or what. I just hoped it would stay that way even after my fiancé left for work. Fortunately, it did. I have seen the two brothers around town since, but I hope I never, ever meet them again. Let's not meet, guys.